Hey, Next Levelers, Bob Gibbons here, ready for another great show. I'm excited. This is the Next Level show where we learn how people do things in business, why they do things, and how we can all understand and learn and make things better. And you know what? Have you ever grabbed a shovel and been ready to just like tear into your yard and do some sort of great project at home where you're going to just like transform your little place into a Taj Mahal? Did you ever stop to think, wait a minute, what's under that dirt? Should I be starting to dig without knowing where all my utilities are? Well, our guest today is Chris Stovall. He's the president and CEO of Texas811, and these are the guys that will tell you everything that's underneath the ground that you shouldn't be digging into to make sure you don't get electrocuted or hit a gas line or, pop the water and have a geyser in your front yard that you didn't intend to have. So you can learn more at Texas811.org. And yes, I did say .org. Most of the time we're interviewing guys that are, founding companies that are for-profit, but every now and then we'll have a nonprofit, and today's is a nonprofit. So Texas811.org. So Chris, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
I'm looking forward to our conversation. So, normally we have guys on the show that as I mentioned, that have founded the companies that they run. And today's a little bit different. And you're not the first, but occasionally we'll have somebody that is not the founder, but is the CEO and has a little different angle on things. And in your case, you kind of started from the ground up, so to speak, with this company and rose to the ranks of CEO.
Yes, I did.
So where did you start and how long ago?
Actually, about 15 years ago, I started entry level in the company. The very first position on what we call the call center floor, answering calls from excavators, trying to find out what's underground.
Oh, wow. So if I actually had dialed that number, I might have gotten you to say, don't do this or do that.
I spent my time on the phones, yes, sir.
Well, I mean, in a way, that's kind of cool, though, because you get to know really like the very basics of the organization and the mission and all that before you start telling other people what to do.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, it helps, too, with staff because they know that I've been there and done that. I'm not just painting a picture of what I think things could look like. A lot of times I've worked in those positions on my journey through the company.
Yeah, so if you're asking somebody to do something or you're talking about strategy or policy or whatever, and somebody says, well, you just don't understand.
Right. It's not something that I haven't done myself.
Guess what? You do understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would kind of nip that conversation in the bud real quick, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. So what other kind of positions did you have?
So I started out as an agent handling inbound phone calls, and then from there I worked in the training department, and so I helped train new hires how to do the job. And then I managed the contact center operations for a while, director of operations, executive vice president, and then now CEO. So I just kind of moved up the ranks through operations mostly, but did spend some time in training.
I mean, that's 15 years sounds like a long time, but that's not very long to go from sitting on that floor taking calls to being the CEO of the whole organization.
It's flown by.
I bet. And how long have you been CEO now?
2 years. So
Okay.
That's my second. I just finished 2 years.
So you're still a noob.
Yes, I am very much.
Well, I'm sure you're doing a great job. The one thing that I found really interesting in our pre-interview information is you actually have a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience. How in the heck do you go from neuroscience to digging in the ground?
So actually, when I started with the company, I had just gone back to school. I was previously military and got out of the military and started entry level at Texas811 while I was going to college, and my degree plan was neuroscience.
Interesting. Yeah. What were you thinking you were going to do with that?
At the time, I was thinking possibly, med school or something like that. So it was a good pre-med degree, but okay. I met my wife and we started a family, and
that'll screw it up every time.
I started doing the mental calculations. I was like, man, that's a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was pre-med as well. My dad, groomed me my whole life to be a doctor, and I got to college and took my first biology class. I mean, I'd done all the sciences in high school, but in college I was like, this isn't what I want to do. This is what he wanted me to do. So I bailed on that pretty fast. But neuroscience, that's pretty interesting. So what were you doing in the military? What branch were you in, by the way?
I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
I did air traffic control while I was in the Air Force.
Wow. So you didn't want to do that in the private sector?
Actually, did for a little while, and then shifted gears with med school aspirations, and the rest is kind of history.
All right. So I'm sorry, we're going to have to take a little diversion here now that you mentioned air traffic control. So air traffic control, I lived here whenever Reagan, busted the union and fired everybody. That was an air traffic controller. But that sounds like a really high pressure job. I mean, is it really, or is the technology such that it's not as bad as it seems?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been in it, but I will say while I was in, the technology that we had was really great. We had a lot of support. It is a high pressure job, but while I was doing it, I was young, and so I enjoyed that sort of pressure and excitement and challenge. Every day is a new challenge. It's the patterns that aircraft arrive in are fairly predictable, but then you have weather and you have emergency situations, and so there's always a problem to solve and a challenge to fix in ATC.
So how long were you in the Air Force?
Almost 5 years.
Oh, wow. So you weren't just go in and get it out of the way and move on.
I signed up for 4 years, and I was in during 9/11 when that happened. And so they implemented what they call stop loss. So when you sign up for 4 years, you're really signing up for 8. It's an 8-year commitment. And so it's
at their option, not yours.
That's right. And so I got the memo that I was going to be hanging out for a little while longer, and that's why it was closer to 5 years for me.
Good news. The checks are going to keep coming.
Yeah.
So how did what were you doing in 9/11 that required them to extend your service? I mean, was it just that you were?
I think it was they looked at any roles in the Air Force that were mission critical roles, and wanted to keep us there. So I guess they identified air traffic as a mission critical role.
And I guess in a way, after 9/11, while commercial planes weren't flying for a while, a lot of military planes were flying, patrolling, trying to prevent any further attacks that might occur.
Yeah, that's right. Though immediately after, I was stationed in Japan at the time. Immediately after, even in Japan, in our airspace, the skies were pretty empty for a while.
So it wasn't just the U.S. that grounded.
It impacted kind of across the globe. I'm not sure outside of my immediate airspace, but the airspace I was responsible for in Japan immediately after was pretty empty for a while.
Were you in Okinawa or where?
Yokota, near Tokyo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a U.S. base down there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a naval air station, and there is an Army base, and then there's also an Air Force base there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always hear about Okinawa, and I don't really hear about much else in Japan, so I wasn't sure.
There's 3 on the mainland. So
interesting. Well, thank you for serving.
Sure.
I'm an Army brat. My dad was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army, so I spent a lot of time on military posts around the world. But anyway, all right. So back to Texas 811. So tell our listeners exactly what is Texas 811. It's a nonprofit. So why is it nonprofit, et cetera?
Yeah, so we're a nonprofit 501c4. We are a member-directed organization, meaning the utility companies that have underground lines in Texas, they formed a company, a nonprofit, to help protect their lines. And a 501c4 nonprofit, essentially, we're not raising money through donations and that sort of thing. What we're doing is we're providing a service that is in the interest of the public welfare. So that's kind of how our status comes about. So
your member companies, if you will, owner companies, I'm not sure how to characterize it exactly, but that's going to be kind of like Encore and Atmos Energy and Dallas Water Utilities, I guess. So interestingly enough, in our industry, there's very few, I say very few, the Class B, what we call Class B facilities like water, sewer, they're not required to be a participant in the system. So a few do voluntarily, but the majority of our membership is made up through phone, cable, gas, electric, that sort of thing. But we do have some voluntary participation from water and sewer. Now, when you use the term required, so is this something that was mandated by the legislature? Yes, there's actually a state law that governs calling before you dig if you're an excavator, and also participation in the system if you're a utility operator. So while we talk about, this is a nonprofit and we're in the interest of
public welfare, there's also a legal requirement. If you're the person who's digging in your front yard planting a tree, it is required by law to use
That's a
our
heck of a
service.
way to get customers.
Yeah.
Get a law passed that they have to use you.
Job security.
That'd be awesome. You have to use Riata Commercial Realty to be your tenant rep. That would be, I need to figure out how to get that done.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, good luck with that. Exactly. It's never going to happen. So when did that law pass?
This was in the 80s. Actually, I'm sorry, we were incorporated in the 80s. The law didn't come about until the 90s. So it was voluntary participation for a while, and then in the 90s, the law passed requiring participation, and just kind of from there, membership just skyrocketed. And there were a few different notification centers, was what we call ourselves. And the reason we say notification center is because we're the liaison between the excavator and the utility operator. So if excavator's getting ready to dig, they need to know what's underground so they don't hit it. They use our service, and we notify those utility operators that the excavator's digging near their lines.
Interesting. So you use the term excavators, but in my intro, I kind of talked about a homeowner. So a homeowner is not considered an excavator I'm not required by law to call you first, am I?
Well, so yeah, I use that term excavator kind of as an all-inclusive term. Anytime anybody's sticking a shovel in the ground, we recommend they call. Now, the law does kind of break it down to what exactly that would entail, like if you're using mechanized equipment or going deeper than 16 inches, that sort of thing. But the reality is anyone who's putting a shovel in the ground or digging for any reason should use our service.
Yeah.
Lines aren't necessarily buried below 16 inches, and our service is free to the person who's doing the digging.
Yeah, and I've used your service long before I even knew that you personally existed. I definitely did that. And also the people that did the fencing around my house, they also did that because we had to do a retaining wall. So I've been a customer, even though I didn't really totally understand how it all works at the time. We're going to take our first break. We will be right back after this. Hey, welcome back to the Next Level Show. We're talking to Chris Stovall, President and CEO of Texas811. You can learn more about that organization at texas811.org. And you must do that. You should do that. You better do that to not light yourself up when you're going to be digging. So just before the break, we were starting to talk a little bit about the digging and how, who has to call before or go to the website before and find out, where all the lines are buried. So you mentioned, Chris, that lines are not necessarily buried 16 inches or more. Aren't there regulations that require certain things to be buried below a certain depth?
So the governing bodies over the utility operators in Texas are both the state legislature and also the Railroad Commission, and it differs. So gas, they have certain requirements, electric, phone. Everybody kind of has their own requirement, which is why we recommend any time that you're going to do any sort of digging, you call, because you don't know what is below until you use our service. And so using our service kind of gives you that direction. And a lot of instances, phone, cable, that can be buried very shallow. Yeah. And so you may be following guidance around how to excavate near a gas line and hit a phone line. And, it doesn't sound like as big of a deal, but, there are instances where cutting a phone or cable line can be a big deal. For instance, if it's feeding a hospital or an airport, or if you have somebody who relies on that sort of connectivity in their home for some medical devices or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And a major sporting event, you definitely don't want to be the guy who cuts the line and, and the neighbors lose cable. So.
Yeah, I've had a few neighbors that I've seen lighten up Facebook when they don't have their reception at a critical time, which, it is annoying. But so you say we have the electrical, the gas, the phone companies, the internet providers, I assume, the cable TV operators.
Yes.
And why did the sewer and water people get a pass? Why aren't they required?
That's the way that it's been since the law was passed. They identified Class A facilities and Class B facilities, and the Class B were water and sewer. I don't really know the history there. I would imagine maybe it's because there's not as much danger involved in hitting a water line. However, I think what we've learned over the years is that there is some danger around hitting a sewer line. The gas can be toxic.
Yeah, the methane gas that builds up.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the event someone's digging and we don't notify water and sewer, we always recommend that that person contact the municipality directly. So if you're digging in Dallas and we don't happen to notify Dallas Water, we would recommend you contact the city of Dallas directly to have them come out and mark their lines, and they will.
Okay. And so is that something that you guys automatically do just as a courtesy, or only if those are in part of your system?
Yeah, so we pretty much say it on every single contact we have with someone who's digging. We let them know, hey, if you think that there's anybody out there who we didn't notify, you would contact them directly, such as, water, sewer, slurry, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So what area do you guys cover?
All of Texas.
So your name is Texas811, so you really mean it, the
Yes.
entire state.
The entire state. And we do we actually had a record day the other day. We did over 18,000 inbound notices in a single day. That's 18,000 notices of excavation in Texas in a single day.
So that's anything from me calling you up saying, hey, I need to put in a new sprinkler system in my house, to somebody who's moving dirt with a giant piece of equipment to build a new office building.
Yeah, that's correct. And the average is probably closer to 16,000 or so a day during the week. And every time somebody calls in for that excavation notice, we send out a message to about 5 utility operators that someone's digging near their line. So 17,000 inbound times 5 on the outbound side. That means we're sending out a notice about every couple of seconds that someone is digging in Texas.
That's amazing. Of course, that tells you about Texas. I mean, we're obviously a growing country. Yeah, right. We used to be.
That may resonate with some people.
A state. We are a growing state, and we're getting a lot of inbound migration from other states.
Yeah.
It seems like every other day there's a new company announcing a relocation to Texas. I think McLaren, the automaker, just announced that as well just this week. So, so there's a whole lot of activity. So 18,000, that seems like a lot. You must have a big group of people working with you.
We have about 250 employees at Texas811, and you're right. I mean, we're growing every single year. The inbound volume that we have on excavation activity since I would say 2008 has been on the up.
Yeah, I would think so. And so this covers residential, commercial, retail. I mean, pretty much any kind of property. How do you know where all these lines are?
So the utility operators actually provide us with data, and then we load that data into our software application. And so whenever we get an inbound call, we look up anyone who's in that location by referencing that data that these utility operators send us. It's GIS-based system, so we can see kind of like basically lines and overlaid on a map, and then we know who's in that area, and we identify the utilities that may be in conflict with that excavation, and then we send them a notice that the excavator's digging near their line.
Okay, so that seems fairly easy if we're in a city and I call you up and I give you the address of my house or the address of my office or whatever and say, hey, I'm going to do this, come mark my lines. That seems fairly straightforward. But what happens when you're talking about a ranch or a piece of property that, doesn't have even an address associated with it? What do I tell you whenever I call you in that situation?
GPS is our friend. We love getting GPS coordinates anytime it's in a rural location because it is very helpful to identify. If we don't have GPS coordinates, we take driving directions. So we'll take driving directions from a major highway onto a farm-to-market road and then onto a county road or a ranch road, and we just get mileage and driving directions that take us to the general vicinity. And then we look up anybody who may be near that area and send them a notice.
So I can call you up and say, take a right at Farm Road 16 and go for 45 miles and make a left onto the dirt road. I don't know what that dirt road is. I mean, that seems like it's pretty
it is challenging.
Difficult.
Yes, and that happens every day. We get those calls. And, a lot of times we're looking at maps, and we have several different maps that we reference when we're on the phone with these excavators or anybody who's digging, really. And, a lot of times they'll say, well, you just turn left next to the old church or, right past the convenience store. And those aren't showing up on our map. So we have to stay on the phone and kind of get more detailed information. Our goal is to provide the most accurate information we can to the men and women who are going out to mark where those lines are at.
But I guess what I'm thinking is 18,000 calls coming in. And the people that are calling, in many cases, are pretty sophisticated. They're excavators. They know exactly what's expected. They probably have the GPS coordinates. But I got to believe a lot of those calls are coming in from people that are fairly clueless. People like me, probably, that if I don't have an address, I'm lost as to what you need. So I'm going to be on the phone with you quite a while.
Yeah, we do. We spend a little bit more time on the phone with those who we don't like the term clueless. We prefer first-time caller. But, we have a script that we work through that kind of educates as we're on the phone because, a big part of our mission isn't only the damage prevention aspect of it, which is basically protecting the underground lines, but it's also public awareness. You mentioned when we first started talking that you didn't know a whole lot about it. I'm glad that you called, but there are a lot of people out there who still don't know that they should be using this service before they dig. So we try to take that as an opportunity to educate people when they're a first-time caller on who we are, what we're about, and, hey, tell a neighbor or a friend.
Well, I have to admit, I lived out in the county one time, Johnson County, south of Fort Worth, and I did dig up my yard one time because I saw this big sort of wet spot in the yard. And so I just got my shovel out and started digging, and I figured I knew that it was probably the main water line coming in from the water meter out on the street, and I found it, and I turned the water off and repaired it and put it all back, and it was all fine. Now I was a lot younger and more ambitious then. I wouldn't do that again probably, but I definitely should have called in that situation, even though I kind of knew what was there. What I didn't know was I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that's always the problem, right? In any industry, what we don't know is what can really come and bite us.
Yeah, and in a lot of instances, people have experiences like you just said, and they dug, they didn't hit anything. It was a safe experience. But there are times when you dig and you get into an electric line or something, like a gas line, and it's dangerous. It's a safety issue. So we always recommend calling, even if you're doing a quick repair like that. We have different ways to get people out sooner depending on needs. So if you got a water line repair that needs to be addressed immediately, we can get people out there in a priority status. Typically, we like people to contact us 2 days before they plan on excavating.
Okay.
So if you got a weekend job, a DIY job, then call during the week, and then that'll give the people plenty of time to get out there and mark where the lines are so that when Saturday comes, you can get right to work.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Problem is that there's so many people that do things spur of the moment, spontaneously, or it seems like an emergency, so they don't really think to stop and hey, do I need to worry about what's underneath that dirt? And I agree with you. They really should. So you also handle other parts of the country, don't you, besides Texas?
Yes, we actually do. We run the centers for South Dakota and West Virginia, and we help with overflow and additional work, and sometimes Spanish language calls in several other states: New Mexico, South Carolina, Mississippi, and we also work in the Gulf of Mexico.
Wait a minute, in the Gulf of Mexico?
Yes.
Okay, that just kind of threw me for a second. So you're mainly dealing with drilling rigs out there.
Yeah, there's submerged facilities in the Gulf. And that isn't an area that's actually governed by the same rules and regulations that we have on land.
Yeah.
Once you get out of state waters, so it's still kind of a new territory for us, and not a lot of people know that we have a service that can assist them in those situations.
Interesting. Yeah. That definitely threw me because I'm thinking, who's going to call you in the Gulf of Mexico? But of course, maybe Exxon or whomever. But all right, we're going to take our next break. We'll be right back after these messages. So your lease is going to expire in the future, and you're trying to figure out how soon should I start working on that? Is it 6 months or a year or 2 years before my lease expiration? Well, there isn't an exact date. This is Bob Gibbons with Riata Commercial Realty, and my clients always meet with me about 2 years before their expiration date, and we create a strategy. and then we review that strategy again a year later. And so we're always working toward what's right for them, not what they think might be an arbitrary date by which they need to figure this out. The keys in determining how much time you need are whether or not you're going to move, whether or not you need to expand, will there need to be construction on wherever you're going to go to, and all those things take more time. So do a strategy meeting a couple of years out with your advisor, and that'll make things a lot more clear. For more information, please go to texastenantrep.com. That's texastenantrep.com. Hey, welcome back, friends. Bob Gibbons here on The Next Level Show. We're talking to Chris Stovall, President and CEO of Texas811. Check them out online, texas811.org. So, Chris, you've described how you're a 501c4, I think you called it, a nonprofit organization. It's mandated by the legislature. The requirement for people to call you before they dig is mandated. So your constituent companies that all come together to form you are all the utility companies. So those utility companies are monopolies, right? So they're regulated by the government in one way or another.
Right.
Does that include all of your folks? I mean, like, I know your utility companies like electric and gas would be that way, but when we come to like the phone vendors, the internet vendors, it seems like there's a ton of those. So they're not exactly monopolies, but they're still regulated, aren't they?
Yeah, and it depends a lot on the location as well. And you know, in certain areas, there may be some private companies, privately held companies that are providing fiber or phone services as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because I've been surprised. Some people that we know that are in live out pretty remote areas or up in Colorado or whatever, they will contract for internet service. And I'm like, well, how do you get your internet service? And they'll say, see that tower way over there? And they'll point to this tower on the other side of a lake or on the next mountain over or whatever. And there'll be this structure and they beam it straight over. And I said, well, who's providing that? And it's just, well, some guy who couldn't get internet and he just took it upon himself to figure out how to do this. So, I mean, those kind of folks, if they exist, would also be potentially part of your service.
Yes, absolutely.
Are they required to be, or just?
Yes, yeah. Any Class A facility, so that would be considered a Class A facility, and we would want them to be a part of the service.
So, I mean, is there a way for you to know about them? I mean, how do you get notified if somebody sets something up like that?
Really, it's word of mouth, them reaching out to us. But one thing that we do have, feel like is a good outreach program is we have the Damage Prevention Council of Texas. And we have 23 chapters spread out. As you mentioned before, Texas is a big state, so we got a lot of ground to cover. So the 23 chapters are spread out all throughout Texas. And the local stakeholders there, anybody who's doing any digging, contractors, excavators, the utility owners, the men and women who are going out and actually marking the lines, we call them line locators. Everybody comes together for these DPC or Damage Prevention Council meetings, and it's a great way to kind of have a grassroots effort to get the word out about our service.
So you really have to have sort of a marketing strategy in two directions. One, to the providers, the utilities, the phone companies, all them, but then you also have to have an awareness program to the, quote, user, the people that are actually going to be digging, the excavators, the construction companies, and the individuals. So you got a big job there. So your councils you just mentioned kind of take care of the constituent company side, but how do you reach out to the general public and to all the companies that might be needing to call you?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and you're right. It is something. It's a challenge that we've looked at internally. We have basically two areas where we're trying to make a big impact. One is damage prevention, and the other is public awareness. So as you mentioned, on the damage prevention side, that's our utility operators, anybody who owns an underground line. We're trying to keep those lines from damage. And then we have the public awareness side, where we're trying to educate those who don't know that they should call before they dig to call, and those who do know what are the best practices when you dig. What do the different colors mean on the ground when people mark with paint and flags? What are the tolerance zones? Should you use equipment within a certain distance from the lines? Like, those are kind of the best practices things that we do for education and outreach.
But how do you, what very tangible steps are you advertising or whatever that you're using to reach the general public?
So we do radio, we do print, we do social media. Unfortunately, I would say, fortunately for us, we have a lot of colleagues in this industry. So every state has some sort of 811 program.
Okay.
And we get together regularly, and we talk to these other states about different ways to spread the message, 811. And so one of the things that we did recently, which I thought was really cool and it really paid off, was we pulled our money, and not a whole lot. We put it together, and we decided to put the 811 logo on a horse. And
You mean like brand it?
Like put it on the jockey's boots and the jockey's hats and
like
in a horse race. Yeah, in a racehorse.
Gotcha.
And I might get my facts a little messed up here, but I'll say the first year we tried it, the horse that we put the 811 logo on won 2 out of 3. The Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and Belmont Stakes. Won 2 out of 3.
Oh my!
Was going for the Triple Crown and had an injury out of the gate and didn't make it. The second year was a little bit less impressive, and then this last year, the horse that we put the 811 logo on actually won the Triple Crown.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, so it was huge. The payoff was huge for us in airtime and in media coverage because the jockey Victor Espinosa is doing interviews on Good Morning America and all that, and on front pages of newspapers with a hat that has the 811 logo on it. So it was great. It was brilliant.
That is nice. So I've also seen TV advertisements, I think, haven't I?
Yeah, we do TV. So a lot of times, too, we'll partner with utility operators who really want to get the message out. And so Shell Pipeline is actually a big advocate of 811, and they sponsor Joey Logano. He races NASCAR, and he does ads on TV to kind of PR messages. We have the 811 logo on his race car, so whenever he's racing, 811 is on either the deck lid or somewhere else on the car. And we do different public service announcements on our own as well. We'll put it together and then try to get some airtime for it. Anything we can do to get the message out.
And literally the 811 is if I pick up the phone and instead of dialing 911 for an emergency where I'm in an accident, I dial 811, that actually takes me directly to you.
That's right, yeah. And, we like to say you call 811 so you don't have to call 911. It's an easily recognizable number.
Yeah.
We do a lot to try to raise that brand awareness. But also, it's not the only way you can get in touch with us. And in fact, a lot of people today would prefer to go online or use their mobile device instead of making the call, and we can accommodate all of that.
So you have just Texas811.org that I've mentioned on the show several times. Is there another place besides that?
That's the main way, Texas811.org, or you can access it from your mobile device. We do have a mobile app. It's in the App Store, Texas811.
Yeah, but nobody's going to download that unless they're doing it multiple times,
right,
a commercial excavator general contractor. But I would never do that.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you brought up the website, because a lot of first-time callers may be a little bit intimidated by going like, okay, how do I do this? But we actually have a section on our website dedicated to homeowners. So if you're a homeowner and you're getting ready to dig, you can go to our website, and it walks you through the process step by step. And it's really pretty quick and easy. You could probably be done in 10, 15 minutes and have your lines marked for the weekend job.
So let's go back to the advertising, because getting the word out for any organization is really important. If it's a nonprofit, they need to get it out to their constituents who need their service or to their donors. If it's a company, they need to get customers. So understanding the marketing is always the number one thing people are so interested in learning about. So in your kind of marketing and the getting the word out to the users, the people that should be calling you to prevent the damage, what is the most effective?
That's a great question. One of the approaches that we're taking right now is any opportunity that we get to talk about 811, we're going to take it. It's one of the reasons I agreed to be on this show, even though I'm very nervous about being on air. It's an important message that we're trying to get out. It's a safety issue, the challenge, and we try to look at our job as we keep people safe. Men and women go home to their families every day if we do our jobs well.
Right.
And so any opportunity that we have to get the message out, we'll jump on.
But when you pay for getting the word out, so you're not having to pay to be on the podcast on the show.
Yeah.
But when you do pay for radio advertising, for TV advertising, for print, for whatever, for putting your name on the jockey, where do you see the greatest bang for your buck?
One of the things that we're looking at now is measuring the hits to our website whenever we do like a big campaign.
Yeah.
So we were able to track our website traffic during the Kentucky Derby, Belmont Stakes, and Preakness, and we saw a huge hit. A lot of the traffic to our website increased during that time. However, we didn't see a lot of correlation between the activity on our website and the actual locate request, what we call a locate request. It's when somebody wants to find out what's underground. That didn't really increase. And so what we believe is going on is brand awareness is increasing. People are learning more about this, and they're wanting to find out what it is, but they may not have a job that weekend, or they may not be digging until 2 or 3 months down the line. So we are able to see an impact to awareness, but not yet the direct correlation with they're actually filing a ticket online with us.
I mean, top of mind awareness is really what you want, because, I mean, whenever I have a need for something, I'm going to associate that need with whatever. I mean, I don't care if it's, hey, I'm thinking of Mexican food, I think of my favorite restaurant, or I think about, I need to buy a car, what comes to mind? I need to go to some other city. What's the hotel or what's the airline I'm going to fly in? So, I mean, there's all kinds of awareness issues. I mean, even with my own business in commercial real estate, I would love it if when anybody thinks, hey, I need a new office, the first thing they think of is Riata Commercial Realty or Bob Gibbons. That's the top of mind awareness campaign. So it sounds like that was highly effective in the top of mind awareness. TOMO, for short, a lot of people call it. So your TOMO campaign really worked well. I don't think I kind of agree with you that seeing an increase in the actual job requests wouldn't necessarily follow from that, because it's not like suddenly somebody's going to say, "Oh, I'm going to go do a job and start digging because I saw the 811 ad."
Yeah, and I will share with you, it is it's a big challenge for us, the awareness side of it. So there are industry groups that measure. What are the root causes of damages? Like, what's really going on? Why are lines getting hit? And what we find is the number 2 reason that a line gets hit is because someone failed to call, didn't know that they should call 811 before they dig.
Let's hold that thought. We'll pick that up on the other side. Sorry, we got to take another quick break. Welcome back to the Next Level Show. Bob Gibbons here talking to Chris Stovall. Go to Texas811.org to learn more. So I rudely interrupted you just before the break. And so, do you remember what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think I was saying awareness is a big challenge for us. It's the number 2 reason that a line gets cut, an underground line gets cut, is because of lack of awareness. So it's something that we're really focused on. We're trying to measure our impact and do a better job at getting the word out to call 811 before you dig.
So how would you measure that? Just the number of people that cut lines unknowingly per year? Or
we
what?
measure 2 things. One is we measure the damage ratio, and that is how many lines are getting cut. And we want to drive that number down. Our goal is 0. I know it's an aspirational goal, but we believe that any other goal really would be settling. So our goal is to have a state where there are 0 damages. And we also measure awareness, and we want that number to go up. And there are a few different agencies connected to the industry that can do like the Nielsen type surveys to find out just
interview
general
people, take a poll.
Yep, exactly.
Have you ever heard of 811?
That's it.
Okay, so that's a measure is what's the awareness on the how many lines are getting cut. How many lines do get cut?
So how we measure that is through a ratio. So out of every 1,000 excavations, how many lines are getting cut? And we're measuring it from a few different places and a few different angles. And really, it seems to be different depending on the utility type that is getting hit. So maybe gas, fortunately for us, they're very low. There's not a lot of gas lines getting hit. for every 1,000. But the shallower stuff, or those who are voluntary participation, may get hit a little bit more often per 1,000. We've only really started digging into the data and aggregating it because there are several sources of that data. But what we do have, we know we're shooting to drive that number down and make it as close to zero as possible.
Well, I mean, the consequences can be catastrophic.
Yes.
I mean, I remember several situations in which you see on the news that somebody hit a gas line and blew up. I mean, the Cadillac deal over in far west Fort Worth way back years ago is one that I remember, and it just, blew up the building, and you hear about it in apartments or houses or whatever. So, I mean, loss of life is a big thing, but loss of property is a big thing as well.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of damage. How does the insurance industry deal with this, or do you even know? Do they deny or reduce claims that they pay off because people did or didn't call 811 in advance?
I know it is something that they investigate. I'm not sure how it plays out once it leaves our area, but it is something that they look at. And there is some guidance in the law. If anybody is really interested and just kind of wants to geek out on it, they can Google Texas Utilities Code Chapter 251. And I don't want to interpret the law for anyone, but in that law, it does give guidance on what would happen if a line was cut and you didn't call 811 before you dug, and what would happen if a line was cut and you did use the service. So it is something that they look at anytime there's an incident.
Can you quote that law by heart?
I do have to look it up occasionally, but I have spent a lot of time looking at it.
I bet you have. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. So, well, speaking of laws, so you got these legislature is dictating that these people call you. So do you have to spend much time in Austin dealing with, and not just Austin, but the other states that you serve as well, in dealing with the legislatures? And
we do, not a whole lot, but we do make sure that we're, like you mentioned, top of mind. We want the legislators to know that the service that we provide is important, that it's critical to the states that we serve, and we want them to be aware of that whenever they are thinking about new laws and that sort of thing. So we just kind of make our presence known. For instance, in South Dakota, once a year we go and we serve them breakfast.
The legislators.
Yeah, we do. And we just talk about what it is that we are doing and what's going on, just to keep our presence there known and let them know that what we do is important.
Okay, yeah, but it's South Dakota. How many could there be? You got like at 2 or 3 tables that you have all the legislatures.
Yeah, we have quite a few people coming through. So, but it's a fun time, and we have a presence in Austin as well. And we have someone who works for us who kind of maintains a relationship with legislators down there, and we also have an oversight agency, the one called Board of Texas. They're kind of a quasi-governmental agency that makes sure that we're doing a good job, and so they're pretty connected.
And I got to believe all your constituent utility companies have their own government relations people that are also
way more than us.
Yeah, way more than you.
Yeah.
And they're probably tag teaming on to your efforts to make sure that awareness is out there as well.
Yes, sir.
Is there any legislation that you think needs to be enhanced that is not already there?
It's actually a really well-written law. I mean, it covers a lot. And that agency I was telling you about, I think they have a little bit of latitude when it comes to making sure that we're doing a good job to create kind of rules based on that law. And that one called Board of Texas actually is a governor-appointed board. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's pretty good. I know that there's talk every once in a while about opening it up and bringing it up to speed, with the present day, but not a whole lot. I mean, I think it does a pretty good job.
So you don't see the law necessarily expanding any further beyond what it is today, and requiring the water and sewer folks to be brought in, for example, or any other utilities, utilities, what others can there be, but no other services that you can think of that.
No, I mean, there's talk about it from time to time, just, hey, what would it be like, or should we do this? It never really goes anywhere that I know of, other than just kind of talk, and seems to get, not a whole lot of traction.
Okay. Good. Well, then you don't have to spend too much in politics, too much time in that. So that sounds like a good thing. And yours is a free service, by the way. I know you mentioned that on a break a minute ago, but I just want to make sure that everybody gets that on the radio, that they know that it is, in fact, free to the user. So you mentioned earlier that you have about 250 employees, and you have a call center with a lot of your employees in that call center. But not everybody's actually in the center physically. Don't you have a lot of your employees working from home?
That's correct. We have probably about, out of our call center employees, a little over half actually work from home. Yeah.
125 people working from home.
It's a lot.
How do you decide who gets to work from home and who doesn't?
So essentially we look at the employee's willingness and desire to work from home. I would say several years ago our criteria was a lot more than that, but we've done a lot to strengthen our culture. And so really if you're still working for us today, you're an A player. And, if you wanted to work from home, then we would allow that. Maybe in years past, our culture wasn't as strong and maybe we had some employees who we wouldn't trust at home. That's not the case now. We trust all of our employees. I mean, if you're making it through our training program and you're staying on board, then, we trust you to do the job.
Yeah.
Not everybody wants to work from home, though.
Well, I was just going to say, so if these employees get to choose, it's interesting that it's about a 50-50 split.
Yeah, some people prefer to work in an office. I count myself among those people, weirdly enough. I go a little stir crazy if I stay at home too long. I like to be out and around people.
It's interesting because when I started my own company 15 years ago, I never wanted to work from home. And it was not really a possibility at the time because my wife was a stay-at-home mom. She was homeschooling our kids. I knew if I was at home, I wouldn't get anything done because want to be with them. But fast forward 10 years after I started, things changed. We had some water damage at the house that had to be fixed. And so I said, well, I'm going to just office from home while the work gets done, and then I'll go back out and get another office. Well, that was 5 years ago, and I'm still working from home.
Is it your favorite office so far?
Yes and no. I like working from home because I know where everything is. I never have to have the issue of, oh, man, I left that at the house and I'm at the office now, or I left that at the office and it's the weekend. I got to go back to the office to get it. So from a convenience standpoint, it's great. From a cost standpoint, it's great. But I agree with you. I don't like it as much because, it's not like I'm going to have people over for meetings, client meetings, for example. We meet at their office, which in my particular business is good because that's where we ought to be meeting because It's all about them and their office. Yeah, I can see if, whenever we have company meetings, people come to my house and we do it around the dining room table and nobody seems to care. Everybody, we've got a kind of an unusual culture because everybody works from home. Oh, yeah. And that's kind of intentional now. That's our plan, even as we grow, is that everybody stays at home. But yeah, I still sometimes think, I wonder what it'd be like to go back and have an office.
Yeah, I think, what you were saying is a trend. I feel like it's a good trend that a lot of people are working from home, especially as you mentioned, so many people moving to the Texas area because I don't know if you've driven in Dallas lately, but working from home is definitely a perk if you're not fighting the rush hour traffic.
It really is amazing. I mean, I find myself trying to schedule my meetings in a way that I don't have to deal with rush hour. Although, I had a 7:30 meeting this morning. I had an 8 o'clock meeting yesterday morning. So I had to, deal with that. And I've got another one tomorrow. So, here 3 days in a row, I'm having to fight the traffic. So, it's not a perfect thing, but I try to do it as much as possible. So how do you manage people from home? When you have some at home and some not at home, how are you being, quote, fair?
Yeah, so it's a big challenge. And I got to tell you, when we first started this work at home program, I mentioned I worked my way up through the company. So I was actually running the call center when we had this big push to get everybody working from home, and it scared the crud out of me. I wasn't sure what to do, and so I just poured myself into researching, like, how do people do that effectively? I was concerned about culture impact. I was concerned about connectivity, and frankly, honestly, I was concerned about production.
Yeah.
So what we did was we sent everybody home with webcams. They weren't required to keep them on at all times, but any meetings that we had, we wanted to look people in the face.
Sure.
We felt that would keep them connected to the organization, and just, you have that face time. That was important. We also rolled out a company social network, which allowed them to continue staying connected to everything that was going into the office. And those things really help people stay connected to the culture, and their numbers were, in a lot of cases, better than the in-office staff.
Good productivity.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Sure.
Really enjoyed you as a guest. Listeners, please go to Texas811.org to learn more. Thank you for being with us. Go to thenextlevelshow.com to learn more about the show and look at our archive of past guests. Be back next week.
A lot of